So from there, I wanted to ask you, what do you think you could say or offer to people who are feeling stuck in one mode of perception? And what I had written to myself is that there's kind of like, I would say at least three reasons why people get stuck in whether it's non-doership or it's impersonhood or everything's an illusion. Nothing matters is like one is that belief that it's the only truth. So turning away from it's betraying the truth. Then you've got the belief that this is salvation. So if I go back to modes of perceiving people as real, then I'm going to suffer forever. But then the other one I think that I would be curious to hear from you is just the logistics of switching modes because people will come out of psychedelics and feel like it's really hard to get back into the familiar sense of reality, even if they believe that, solipsism is not true and it's not saving them from suffering. How can I even get myself to not feel that anymore? And I sometimes think about it as like getting like a lens stuck on the camera and you can't get it off. So, I experience and some people experience like, I really want to start perceiving choice again and perceiving, people as these integrated wholes. But I don't know how because I've gone so long seeing it as otherwise. How can I open myself to like literally logistically getting into another mode? So I don't know if you have any maybe practical advice or encouragement that it's possible when you feel like it's not.
Yeah, great question. I'll answer that in a sec. There were just a couple more things that came up when you were talking about other stuff that I just wanted to quickly share. So for one, I just found it important to say that this word self is really so crucial and something to look at so closely when it comes to these teachings. And I love that Tim Freak really dialed in on this and he, you know, would ask different people. Like I think I saw him talk with Richard Sylvester and say, but what do you mean by the word self? When you're saying there's no self, what do you mean by that? Because that's crucial. Are you saying there's no homunculus in there pulling levers? I can get on board with that. And that's the thing. It's like these people can rarely pin down what they even mean when they're saying the self is not there. Because it's like, okay, if I define self as a psychophysical organism, that is emanating a general flavor of Jordanness, then it's basically impossible to deny that there's a self right here. And so what do you mean by self? And when you drill down on that, you finally start to get into, well, what we mean is more like there's this feeling of being apart from reality, of being somehow like sealed off or apart from reality, which at this point I would say, yes. So that's another valid mode, the sense of being apart from reality, a mode that can be explored. And I do think it's super, super beautiful and important to invite people to explore tools that can help them discover the modes where they don't feel apart from reality. Because I think that is one of the biggest gifts in non-duality, is that it can help people arrive at a felt recognition that they do belong here and they're not apart from this. They're part of this. They are this. This is home. And I would say if there's the other thing you were talking about with the pointers, I totally agree that so many pointers are just pointing at different modes and then claiming that that's the absolute truth rather than just another interesting angle or way this can seem to be. But if there is like one undeniable thing that these pointers point at, something that I would say is actually undeniable, you could just say it as this is this this
Right.
is here. reality
Reality.
reality is, and that is maybe like the one pointer to pay the most attention to, because the best, I'd say the best people are just repeatedly pointing at just that. This is. Let yourself really feel that this aliveness, whatever this is, this mysterious, enchanting explosion of flavor, it's actually here and it's juicy and it's dripping with voluptuousness and hyper meaningfulness. It's radiating in every direction. It's splendid. It's artful. Let yourself feel it and just be with the actuality that this is here. And just doing that tends to have very positive benefits for a lot of people, because it does tend to dissolve that sense of kind of dissociation, being apart from this and turning this into a mental idea of just like a hostile, cold, random universe, it's like there are other modes available where this can feel like intimacy and home, and you recognize that this is here and it's miraculous that it's here. I can't even say what it
Yeah.
is. So I wanted to mention that. And as far as your question about how people can get unstuck if they're like stuck in some of these less desirable modes and they're becoming problematic. I mean, honestly, I think one of the best ways is just to listen to your channel and listen to your conversations with Tim Freak and some of the, playlists with critiques of non-duality and Neo Advaita, conversations like this. I feel like, as you're saying, listening to people deconstruct these things, I think for a lot of people, that would probably be one of the best ways to kind of break the spell, break the hypnosis of like, reality is only one way and I've seen how it is and I have to freeze myself in this mode. And other than that, I would really just strongly recommend grounding and embodiment practices. For example, somatic therapies like Hakomi. Hakomi is a really good kind of like parts work, like a somatic parts work type therapy where you really go into the body with the practitioner. I think just really coming back into the physical body and letting yourself feel that this is solidly here. This is bones and muscle and cartilage and sinew and organs and it's full of viscerality and intimacy, becoming intimate with the body, grounding practices such as getting your bare feet on the earth, laying on the earth, getting in the sauna, getting in the cold shower, doing breath work can be a good somatic practice, holding rocks in your hands, eating root vegetables, eating meat, even if you feel really ungrounded, meat can be very grounding and connect you back to the earth and letting yourself just be a normal person. I think a lot of spiritual and non-dual people, there's kind of a shadow of like being the black sheep or being the special one who figured it all out and exited the matrix. And there's this hidden identity of like, I'm the special one who exited the matrix. So I can't just live a normal life. I have to somehow live this very special life. And I've certainly been there, done that, played out that shadow for a long time and probably still am in various ways. But if you can just let yourself be a normal person for a while, just let yourself watch Netflix and just, eat some fast food, or it doesn't have to be fast food, but cook a meal at home. Let yourself veg out, let yourself chill, let yourself engage in mindless entertainment, let yourself go for walks, just spend time with people you love. Do whatever the things that you did as a child or a younger person before all this
Mm.
spiritual hypnosis got you locked into modes that you don't want. Start doing all that stuff. Think about what you loved to do as a child and do that stuff, and I think just through letting yourself be a normal person and just be a human being, that's one of the best ways to start to return to the human experience. But it can be difficult and it does take time because honestly, I find myself still generally, I would say, more ungrounded than I would really like to be. I'm like really focused on trying to ground down and root down even more because I spent so many years exploring intensely destabilizing and ungrounding experiences with psychedelics and then with radical non-duality that I still feel kind of dissipated, like kind of
Yeah.
like
What you mean?
I'm not all right here in a way.
Gather.
I'm like all over the universe somehow, and I'm like trying to like bring it back here and like root it to this earth. And it's an ongoing process. So it's also important to be gentle with yourself and realize it's not going to happen all at once. It's not going to happen overnight. It's okay to take your time. You can't rush your healing process, your grounding process. And the other key thing I would say is just to really just let yourself appreciate whatever stage you're at and whatever mode you happen to be in and realize, just notice that it's not actually permanent. Even if you do feel stuck, just notice that, pay closer attention and realize that every moment is fresh and has not been seen before. Every moment is a subtly different mode, a subtly different perspective. And, playing with that might be valuable for some people, or for some that maybe is a little too non-dual to go more into the, zooming in on impermanence. So
Mhm.
I think generally, yeah, just kind of ceasing for one, also stopping whatever practices have gotten you locked into that place. So if you're meditating all the time or you're reading non-dual books all the time, stop doing that and just do, everyday human things for a while.
That's super helpful, and I also appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that, it's that you struggle with it too at times, and that it is an ongoing process and won't happen overnight. I wanted to go back to, because one thing that I found really helpful too is when you think about, like, just going back to, like, kind of boring, mundane life, is what you were saying, where you felt like one of the greatest sort of golds of what you got out of some of those, like, presencing practices, or like being with what is instead of being like, what is beyond all of this, to use that sort of prompt of like, this cup is here right now, but bringing a sense of wonder to that, and being like, this is a beautiful mystery, or maybe you won't see it as a mystery, but like that the fact of existence is incredible. Like, there's a woman who's the wife of a teacher I used to have, and she said something like, perhaps the greatest miracle of all is that there's anything here at all. And to really get into a mode of savoring the preciousness of the things that we call mundane. That's like, isn't this right here magic enough that I don't need to go into states that negate these things, so that you can sort of come back to even seeing that consensus reality is itself a miracle. We're all miracles because we're here. And that really helped me, I think, to get over that sense of like, well, I'm just going back to like the rote, mundane matrix world. It's like, but all of this is itself mysterious and beautiful and wondrous. And can I really savor all of these moments that non-duality will kind of tear down and say is in the way or meaningless? And maybe to kind of see that, like, people who are stuck in that perspective are really missing out on being able to get joy and meaning and beauty from all of these seemingly mundane things. Even, talking to somebody about the weather could be the most interesting thing ever, because it's like, how did we get to this? That this is two entities engaging and acknowledging each other's existence. And so I think, yeah, it's great to hear lots of different things that have helped other people.
Can
Here's
I
a good
comment on that real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, just thanks for making that point. That's an amazing point. Totally affirm that if you look closely at anything in boring, ordinary experience, you can just start to notice that it's all astonishing. It's all miraculous that it's even here. It's all like overflowing with meaningfulness if you really like let yourself sensitize to the artistry of it and just really let yourself feel that it's actually here and it happens to look like this, and notice the detail. They say God is in the details, and just really let yourself feel the detail. And at the same time, I would say that type of practice was actually one of the most powerful for opening really deep non-dual states for me, like really sensitively going into that and just really staying with the ever shifting artistry in a very kind of like zoomed in way, like outside of the story of Jordan, just being with the raw fact of suchness, of beingness. That's kind of one of the main that's the main practice that Peter Brown recommends. Actually, he calls it the yoga of radiant presence, where you just primarily drop labels and descriptions and let yourself be seduced by the ever-present lusciousness and miraculousness and suchness of being itself, and you just stay with that. So I would tell people to, just realize that if you go really deep into that type of practice, it could actually open into more like non-dual or ungrounded states. So, you have to just calibrate and pay attention to that. But you're totally right that there can also just be very everyday degrees of appreciation that don't lead to like super sensitizing or super zooming in to where you could start to lose touch with your human self. And yeah, just like life can be really enjoyable and wonderful in its ordinary human way.
Yeah,
So yeah, I love that.
for adding that, and I'll add something there because that was an important point. I'll just tell a very quick story, is that I one of my first people that I was influenced by was Jeff Foster back in the day before he had come out and said that what he'd gotten involved with was a loveless cult, which he called Neo Advaita, and started shifting to away from self negation to self compassion. What I had loved the most about him was that I felt like his writings had really opened me to mystery and appreciating mystery. And that was so beautiful. But I think what it's been about for me and what can help people that we're speaking about now is not to have that condition that we can only appreciate mystery when we get ourselves out of the way. So can we now reintegrate the self and the personality and, even suffering and stories? Can we now include that in the mystery? That even what's called the veil is also made of mystery so that we don't have to feel like we need to, that there's a condition that has to be met in order to see the mystery other than just being like, whoa, the fact that it's here, what? And including all the personal and the human in that rather than excluding it. So
That's a great point. Suffering itself is miraculous too and astonishing. And one other quick thought on that question of if people feel stuck, like, and want to shift into a more human mode, the other thing that came up was just any amount of structure you can bring into your life can be very helpful. Structure is very grounding. Like, build things into your start using a calendar and build some kind of regular routines and practices into your calendar and start following a routine, get organized, like just reactivate more of the left brain, because I think when we go super deep into non-duality, we often become really imbalanced toward the right hemisphere. And any ways that you can reactivate the left brain, doing math problems, doing puzzles, things like that, I think the left brain tends to be much more kind of grounded in consensus human reality.
totally. I have to say my favorite is watching LOL cats. Funny cat videos, highly recommended. But also, like you brought something up that I think was helpful, well, I know was helpful for me is like starting to do more relational types of practices, whether it's going to do like ecstatic dance or I mean, I know a lot of people might not want to do this, but there's things like contact improv dancing, but anything that like kind of brings you into contact with the other and then you and there being a relationship there and embodied sort of intimacy, or maybe it's getting more massages or massaging people to like get that sense of like fleshly reality is super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a natural place to mention also like men's circles and women's circles. As you mentioned before, men's work is a core part of what I do, and I think that that's a very humanizing modality to sit in circle with other men and just share from the heart about what's really real and vulnerable and alive in your human experience, and be held in this field of presence and love, and then explore exercises that are about holistic mastery of life and very focused on the grounded elements of life as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's well said. And also one other thing I'm thinking of now is that a lot of people say is helpful is to start introducing yourself to other traditions and other spiritual traditions, not necessarily to take them on, but to recognize that no, like this non-duality thing is not the only or the most beautiful or most true, because there's Kabbalah, there's Sufism, there's Christian mysticism. So if you're drawn to that sort of thing, to realize that a lot of these traditions embrace the self and embrace creation and participation and all of that, to kind of shake out that sense that like this is the only way, and then to get potentially excited about those other things and get a cat. Um
That's a great point. Like, reconnect to your ancestral traditions if you have any, and if you don't, explore your culture's ancestral traditions, because that is, whether you realize it or not, that's a huge part of the cultural operating system that was you were born into and that worked for your ancestors. And as I said before, for me, reintegrating a lot of Christianity in kind of a meta Christian way of not needing to really identify as Christian at this point, but having had many profound mystical experiences of Christ and of the love of Christ, and just reintegrating a lot of the value systems and the listening to the music and praying and some of the rituals and practices and values that I grew up in, that's also been extremely grounding for me and extremely helpful. So yeah, can recommend that.
It makes me think that I love that our conversation's just going all over the place, but it makes me think of one of the things that you also get in, at least in the non-dual teachings that I got into, was this idea that actually all mystical traditions are pointing to the same thing, and that they're all pointing to the non-existence of the self, or that everything is really consciousness, or there's no doer, and that's just not true. Like, when you get into the nuances, you get all these different strands that are saying different things. Like, some are saying the world is a real expression of whatever they're calling the ground of being. Some are saying, devotion to a relational God is valid and important. Others are saying we're here to participate and fully express our personalities to, be part of evolution or what have you. So that's also, I think, helpful to realize that that's kind of a misconception that every spiritual path is leading to this, what they're saying. So
Yeah, they explore wildly different modes is how I see it now. Like some are much more focused on certain sets of modes and some are much more focused on other sets of modes.